Hello everyone, Nadezhda here, and today we are going to learn how to set up our project browser organization. We are going to learn how to set up our views, sheets and schedules in a way that fits our project. Let's begin. On the left side of my window I have an empty default Revit model, and on the right side of the window I have the image that represents how I want my folders and my views to be organized. Basically, I want my views to be organized in the three main folders, which are work in progress views, documentation views, and the coordination views. Basically, that is the main foldering that I wish to have in my model, and then after that foldering I also want to have the subfolders, which are, in the case of the work in progress views, basically working views and cover sheet views. In the main documentation views, I basically want to have the views for two different phases, and let's say this project we are going to do is going to be conceptual design phase, and then after that the schematics design phase. And I know that I'm going to be working on both of these phases, so I want my folders to be organized exactly that way. I want to first have the folder of the views that belong to CD, and then I want to have the folder of the views that belongs to SD. In the end, I want to have the coordination view folder, so let's learn how to organize our project this way. Of course, it's not just going to be about this way, you are going to learn how to organize the folders any way you want. First, on the left side of my menu, I have the views and I have the sheets and schedules. Basically, first we will begin with the views, and here we have some basic setup that we get when we start a new Revit project. If we right click on the views, we get the browser organization tool, and here we are going to be setting up most of our work. Basically, here we see that our project is now set up by discipline. When I click on edit, I enter the main tools and I go to grouping and sorting. Here we see that our first level of organization is discipline, and then the next level is family and type. What does that mean? Basically, that means that our first model is set up by whatever discipline is set up to be here. So when I go to discipline, and here I have some main discipline, for example, once I change this view to structural, as you can see, it is no longer belonging to that first folder and it has changed to be in the structural folder. Basically, everything is dependent on this. And once you go to browser organization, you can basically change this to whichever main parameter you want to have. Today's lesson is going to be a little bit more advanced because we are not going to be relying on these default parameters, but out of all of these default parameters, basically you have some that can be useful. For example, you can organize by view template, and that way whichever view template you have on a view, that will be your folder organization. Like I said, today we are going to learn the proper way to set this up, the best way when you have the actual project. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the shared parameters. We create shared parameters because, like I said, we don't want to rely on these default parameters. We actually want to dedicate a parameter to only this, only organizing our views and sheets. So first I go to the shared parameters, and here I'm going to create a new group, and I'm just going to call it browser organization, and I click OK. And now I am going to create the new parameters. So when it comes to parameter, when we see this image that I have on the right, we see that I have the three main folders, but I also have the subfolders inside of these folders. So that means now for this I need to have two parameters, and maybe we need third, but we will see that once when we come to that. So first I'm just going to create the parameter for the main folder. I'm just going to call it, for example, documentation type, because this first parameter is basically showing which of the documentation type these views belong to. So I'm going to leave it as common, and here I must change this to be text. It is important to change it to text because if you leave it to number, it will only allow you to insert the numerical value when we actually want the textual value. So I click OK here. And I'm also going to create a new parameter for these subfolders. Basically, these are actually my view types in a way, so I'm going to call that parameter view type. You don't have to name them this way, you can find out whichever name works for you the best. So here I also choose text and I click OK. Now we go to the project parameters and we are going to create these new parameters, and I create the new parameter option, and here I choose the shared parameter. I click select and I will first create this documentation type parameter, and I make sure that this is set to text and everything else I leave as it is. It is important to be instance. And here I'm going to choose views. Now here you can choose both sheets and views. So you can actually lump both sheets and views to these parameters. But you can also create the separate parameter for sheets. It really depends on some main organization of your project, so whatever you choose here is going to be correct and you basically check out what works for you. I'm actually just going to assign it to both sheets and views because that way it's easiest for me. I don't have to create another parameter for sheets, but like I said, it really depends on the way you want to organize your project. So once we have done that, we click OK. We will do the same for the next parameter. So the process is the same. I choose shared parameter. I now choose my other parameter. And here I make sure it's text, here I make sure it's instance, and I'm also going to assign it to both views and sheets. So once I'm done, I click OK. And now I have these two parameters and I click OK once again, and now I can assign them to my views. Once we scroll here, we can see that now we have these parameters assigned here for views. If your parameters are frozen, if you cannot access it, then it means that you have the view template assigned. And once we have a view template, we also have the ability to add or not add our parameters to our templates. That is basically controlled here. If you unchecked these little boxes, basically they will now be controlled by view. But if you have these boxes checked, it will be controlled by the view template. So if you run into the problem of like a frozen parameter, that means you have to check your view template. Of course, in this process, we are also going to learn how to handle this with the templates as well, so that will also be a part of this lesson. But let's go to cancel for now, and let's go to our project browser organization once again. Now we have created parameters, but we also have to create the new organization. So first I make sure that I'm in the views tab because this has to be done separately for views, sheets and schedules. And now I go to new and I'm just going to call this, for example, project view organization. And click OK. For now, let's concentrate on grouping and sorting. Here we choose which parameter we want to use for grouping our views. So I'm going to use documentation type first because that means it's going to be our main folder. And then for second level, I choose view type. So basically, this means that my views will first be organized by this documentation type and then by view type. So once I've done that, I click OK and I check that organization to be my main organization and I click OK. And now I have all of these views in our question marks. I select the views I want to be in my working folder views and I then insert that value here in the documentation type. So I just call it 01 work in progress views. So now we see that our main folder is created. And once we added the next folder, it is going to be fully assigned to both folder and subfolder. So here I insert working views value. And once I have done that, I get both of these views under the folder. Since this one didn't go in, it means I haven't selected it well. So now I can just select it. And now I can actually choose from the drop-down menu, because once we insert some value, then we have that value as an option in the drop-down menu. So now, as you can see, we have created our first folder. So all that's left to do is actually do the cover sheet as well. So here I pick work in progress views, and here I insert cover sheet folder. And now we have our work in progress views fully organized. Next, we have the documentation views, and I just close this. Before we continue with the lesson, let's hear a word of a sponsor, which is also actually me. If you want to learn Revit with me, I have actually created a course which is designed specifically to make you ready to work in Revit independently or in big teams. In this course, you also have the assignments where you get to exercise everything that you learn, and you also get to ask questions directly from instructors. So everything that was not clear to you, everything that you need help with, I answer these questions the same day. So you don't just watch videos, but you interactively learn Revit. I have also made the special attention to the people who already have some experience but in AutoCAD, so I have made sure to actually help you transition from AutoCAD to Revit very smoothly. While this is a beginner's course, it is also very useful for people who already have some experience but want to level up their Revit knowledge. To see the course content, go to thebimtonic.net, and I hope to see you in these lessons. So let's continue with this lesson. So this was the most basic way to do this. You can basically select each view and then assign it the parameter, and it will fall under the parameter. But for the next step, we are going to actually automate this a little bit, and now we're going to be using the view templates. I open these question marks, and basically these are all of our unassigned views. And let's just take elevations, for example. And here we have the type of the elevations, and this is basically the building elevation view type. Now this step is optional. Basically you can just assign the template to these views, and then in template you can just assign the parameters, but I actually like this one extra step because it does actually organize your project a little bit better. So we go to edit type and we duplicate the building elevations, and now we are going to call this CD elevations. And we click OK, and here we go inside the view template, and I will just duplicate this architectural elevation template. I duplicate it and I will call it the CD elevations and click OK. So here in the documentation type, instead of work in progress view, I insert documentation views. In the view type now I insert the CD views. I just add one in front and I click OK. I make sure that these new views are dependent on the template option is on, because that way now once we create the new views, they will automatically assign the template. It doesn't, however, work on the old views. Basically, for those old views, you still have to do the manual process, but it will be very handy once you are creating the new views. So I click OK. And I select these views again, and I just assign them the CD elevations template. In this template, I check if my parameters are fine, and once I see they are fine, I click OK. And now I get these elevations. I will also create the new set of plans because, as you can see in our image, first is floor plans, then sections, then elevations, and then 3D views. So I go to the view and to floor plan, and now I will just click edit type here before I create these plans. So here I will duplicate this and I will call them CD plans, CD floor plans. I also go to the view template so I can create the default template for this type of views. So I duplicate again and I will call this the CD floor plans. And I click OK, and I make sure here I insert what I want. So I insert the documentation views and then the CD views. I click OK, and I make sure that this is checked again, and I click OK once again. And I select both L1 and L2. I click OK, and as you can see now, these plans are added to the CD views. But the problem here is basically the fact that they are not under their own folder. Basically, all of these views are now together. To fix that, I will go back to the browser organization and I go to edit. And here you can either create the new parameter, so you would create the third parameter and then choose it here, and that way it would work perfectly. But another way you can do this is by using some of these other parameters. For example, if we were to choose type, that would also create the good sorting here. We can also sort by view template. Basically, we need to pick one of these project parameters that actually contains the value that we have. In this case, since we have created a new type for each of our views, basically the type option would work well. So we click OK, and that is basically our third level of organization. We click OK once again, and now as you can see, we have the CD elevations and then CD floor plans. Since I want my floor plans to be in the first place, what I'm going to do is I will go back to this edit type option and I will simply rename this to be 01. That way I know it will be before everything. I do the same for elevations as well. I simply go to the edit type and I simply rename it to be, in this case, 03, because our sections are 02. And we will create one section, and I do pretty much the same now for all of the view types. I duplicate the existing one and I will call this the CD sections. Of course, I add the 02 before. I click OK, I choose the view template here, and I simply copy one existing template. So I call it 02 sections, or in this case I call it the CD sections. I don't have to apply the numbering here, though numbering would be very useful here as well, because as you can see we do have some amount of templates, so we want to actually spend the least possible time on scrolling, so numbers would be helpful here as well. But I haven't done it from the beginning, so I will not be renaming it now. Here I make sure that I also choose the CD views. I click OK, OK once again, and now I will get my sections once I create them. I have just set it up and kind of forgotten about creating the section, and now I created this section, and as you can see it falls right under the 02 sections. As for 3D view, I will just rename this one existing 3D view and I will just call it CD view 1, and I go inside it and I make sure that I duplicate it and create the CD 3D views. I will choose one of these templates and I just create this. Pretty much entire process is the same now. I just choose these options. I make sure to assign this template to my 3D view, and now this is what it looks like. Of course, I again forgotten to add it the number, so I just make sure that I add the number 4 so it is ordered properly. and this is what we get. Basically now we can just copy each of these templates, each of these view types, and simply assign the views. For example, let's just go to floor plans, and I'm just going to go to edit type, and I'm just going to duplicate this and call it SD instead of the CD. And I do the same for the template. I simply copy it and I say SD floor plans. And here I simply, instead of SD, insert SD. Or actually, I insert SD instead of CD. And I click OK. And now I simply select these two levels and I get the new folder. As you can see, we have all of these views now properly organized. Process is now pretty much the same for everything. You simply duplicate the view or create a new one, and then you duplicate the view type. We simply call this the SD sections, click OK, go to the view template, and then duplicate the view template. And change this to be SD views. We assign that template to this one, and this is the folders we have. Of course, you don't have to do it one by one. You can also go to the view, manage view templates, and here instantly create all of these templates. And basically this is how you do everything. Now I'm not going to be creating those coordination views because the process is the same. So you don't have to sit through me copying views and copying templates and everything, but this is the way you organize your folders. These question marks will exist as long as you have the unassigned views. Basically, that can also be helpful to you because now you know that these views are unassigned, they don't have templates, they don't have view types, so that probably means that they are some redundant views. So I use those question marks to see if I have any of the views that I can delete that I don't need. So basically, this is what you do. As for sheets, they are pretty much the same. Basically, you simply assign one parameter and then choose that parameter for your organization. So here I can, for example, select these, and in documentation type I can just insert 01 CD sheets. As for these, I can just create, for example, 02 coordination sheets. And now I can go to the browser organization, and here instead of views I simply pick sheets. And now I create a new organization again, and now I call it sheet organization. And click OK, and in group I choose the documentation type. For now I don't need the other level, so I simply choose this. I check it and I click OK. And now all my sheets are also organized. You can do this for schedules as well, and this is how you organize everything. Another option that we have are also filters. I have to be honest, I don't use filters a lot because I don't like hiding views. I want to see what I have in my project so I can delete it if I don't need it or treat it in any other way. But if you want to use filters, you can go back to browser organization, and we will just update this browser organization and click on edit. And here you have the ability to filter your views or sheets or schedules, and you can, for example, choose this parameter documentation type equals to, for example, documentation views. I now want to get rid of the work in progress views. I want to get rid of the unassigned views, so I can use this option and click OK. And as you can see, everything else disappears. The reason why I don't use this is because I can forget that I ever had those views that I have hidden. You can forget that you had them, and you can create them again because you are not aware that you are having filters here, especially if you work in teams. Sometimes somebody can hide something and you will not be aware of this. So it can create a lot of mess. So if you are using this option, you should use it with care. Another way to use those filters is to hide those unassigned views. As I said before, I think it is better to delete them if you don't need them. You can hide them only when you are sending this project to somebody else, but the way you can do this is to go to Browser Organization. I will also edit this existing one, and you can filter by also documentation type, and if you choose not equal to none and click OK, now those unassigned views will disappear. Basically, we have hidden all of these views that don't have that parameter assigned. And this is how you filter views, sheets, and schedules. For schedules, it's pretty much the same. This is the process for all of these types. So you simply choose these parameters and you use them for sorting and grouping. This is one of the most useful lessons because if you are creating a project, especially a big project, you do not want to rely on these default settings. Basically, that will make a hell for you to work in this model. If you have a lot of views, it can be very difficult to scroll through them, to search for them. You do want to have these views handy to you. You do want to have the organization that allows you to find your view with 2 clicks, to be always very aware of where it is, and that way you save a lot of time. Thank you for watching, and if you like my lessons, like and subscribe. I post these videos very often, and if you like learning with me, check out my Revit course. There are many other lessons similar to this one, and if you have any comments, please comment below, and thank you for watching, and see you in the next lesson. Bye! If you want to learn Revit like a pro, take a look at my architectural course through the link below. You will learn how to develop the project from concept to final design using Autodesk Revit. It is ideal for beginners, but valuable for anyone looking to build a solid foundation. By the end, you'll know how to take a design from concept to detailed documentation with confidence and clarity. You will gain a solid Revit workflow you can actually use independently or in work in larger teams in architectural studios. With almost 100 structured video lessons, it is designed to help beginners master Revit step by step. To support your progress, I've included assignments with each lesson, plus the opportunity to ask questions and receive guidance directly from me whenever you need it. This way, you're not just watching tutorials, you're actively learning, practicing, and improving every step of the way. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.